Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our members briefing today about Africa, and specifically about Africa in the context of being the next continent of world-class tech leadership. So that's really what we want to focus on today. We've got our great partner with us today, FINTECH. And FINTECH is a world-class custom software development company providing a complete software design and development innovation service for startups and based in different locations. So we've got FINTECH here in London, in Dubai, in Johannesburg, Cape Town, Texas, and also in Nairobi. So really a global company supporting startups and also enterprises, in software development. And with me is Chase Roux, and Chase is the commercial director of FINTECH, and Chase studied a Bachelor of Science degree at Roux University. It also has won numerous awards in the business development space, driven by his passion for customer success. So Chase, I'm really delighted that you join us today for our member briefing. And of course, the topic is Africa, which is a topic close to my heart. As I was just saying, I'm on the board of a bank dedicated to African nations and to wholesale FX in Africa. And I've been in South Africa myself a few years ago and also traveled across other countries. And often in the Western world, we don't know enough about Africa and we don't know, what really goes on. So I think that's really the goal of our webinar today, to open our eyes what already is available and how we can partner up with African partners, African companies, and specifically to learn about the Africa's current tech landscape. Because we often don't know enough, how much already is being developed. So we want to go deeper into the tech landscape, learn more about that, and understand what's the future of Africa in the tech space. We will also spend time on looking at the development potential there, using high touch, easy communication, with great talent, a great talent pool across Africa. And also the fact that everyone is becoming, of course, a software tech company. And all of us in the fintech space, we are very much aware of that. And we need to make sure that we can develop, with the best talent as fast as we possibly can. So with that, Chase, I really look forward to your presentation now. For all our members, we will use first a slide deck which Chase has prepared to showcase you how to work and how to leverage the talent pool in Africa. And then we will go into a Q&A session where you can ask any questions you've got. And you can ask that in your Q&A polls on the right side of your screen. So you can just type in while Chase speaks any questions which come and pop up for you in your mind. Just type them in and we will come back to them after the presentation is completed. Then we go through the Q&A session afterwards. This session also will be recorded, so you will be able to refer back to it anytime you want to go deeper and to remember, things you want to focus on. So that's also good to know. And with that said, I think I will hand over, Chase, to you now. So looking forward to your presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, Suzanne. It's super exciting to be here. So I'm actually dialing in from our Johannesburg office. So hopefully next time you're in town, we can meet up for something, Suzanne. But yeah, super excited to be here. Thank you. Exactly as you've said, right? Africa, the next continent of world-class tech leadership. Quite a statement, right? I think that the purpose behind what I'm trying to achieve today is I really want to take you through Africa's current tech landscape, and then I also want to take you through a little bit around what the future holds and what Africa has in store for the rest of the globe, right? So by the end of this, I want to change the narrative. I want to change your mind around exactly what you think of Africa. And you said it, Suzanne, every single business is becoming a software developer or a software tech company, right? And everyone on this call very much focused on the fintech side of things. And each and every one of us are aware that at the moment, there is a deep shortage of world-class developers across the globe. And I'm here to tell you that Africa is here to solve that. So before we begin, and before we get on to the next slide, I'm going to take you through a quick poll, all right? And this poll, I really want you to think about how Africa comes across in your mind, right? So this poll literally speaks to, when you think of technology in Africa, what do you think? is at point number 1, I've never thought about it, which is okay. Point number 2, mobile phone connectivity. And point number 3, AI automation and emerging technologies. So while you are going through that and compiling this, I'd like to go to the next slide, because this is probably what comes to mind immediately, right? It's Africa. Most people realize or think that Africa is only one country, right? It's a country filled with huts, starving people. It's dusty. There's herds of animals roaming around, which is obviously the one side of it. The second side of it is probably, it's not all doom and gloom, right? A lot of people at least understand that Africa has beautiful scenery. It's big nature reserves, vast deserts, big rainforests, the gorillas in the Congo, the lions in South Africa, and everyone looking to come for safari, which, Suzanne, I'm sure you did one when you came through. And I was scrolling through social media the other day, and I came across a post that made me laugh, but it really did bear down on exactly what I'm trying to say here. So on the next slide, when I tell people that I'm from Africa, it's almost like this is what they think, right? A little baby strapped to the neck of a leopard. I mean, obviously a rather ridiculous meme, but nonetheless, this is the perception that's out there, right? And for a lot of people that I've spoke to overseas, I get the question, do you have lions in your backyard? And I mean, as funny as it sounds, or as ridiculous as it sounds, the reality is that Africa is the exact opposite of what I've just described. Africa is made up of 54 different countries. I've had the privilege to visit 9 of them. And as you know, we've got offices in Joburg, Cape Town, and Nairobi from an African perspective. But Africa is huge. It's filled with diversity, filled with resources, and filled with a growing population. So just to give you an example of just how big Africa really is, on the next slide, I've put together a demographic or an infographic that just shows if you had to take United States, China, India, and Europe, you'd be able to fit all of those countries into this one continent, which really speaks to the geographic scale. I'll talk a little bit on the population scale a little bit later, but really, this is a huge misconception across the world around what Africa really is. So I've compiled 3 slides that I think will quickly change that narrative. So on this first slide, we've got Lagos, right? This is the capital of Nigeria. As far as the eye can see, is fully built up, big businesses, a thriving metropolis. Technology is rife. On the second slide, I've put together Johannesburg, right? So, of course, I'm based in Johannesburg, and no one as patriotic as someone that is in their current state. But same thing, right? Thriving metropolis. The third one is probably where most of you guys are aware of, probably the most well-known city across Africa, this being Cape Town. Now, what's interesting about these last 3 cities is that each and every one of them are part of the fastest growing cities in the world. In fact, out of the world's 30 fastest growing cities, 21 of those cities are from Africa. Now, I can guarantee you that that is not what you thought of when you thought of Africa, right? So what's holding us back? I've got another poll here that essentially says, all right, what is holding Africa's tech frontier back? Now, in your opinion, do you think it's a lack of education, a lack of internet access, or something like legacy technology? And I'm sure we'll revisit all of these polls a little bit later. So while you guys are doing that poll, I want to go into the
because I just looked at the first results of the poll, which are really interesting. Yes. I want to share them with you. So the first result where we asked, our audience, when you think of technology in Africa, what do you think? 75% said mobile phone connectivity. So I think M-Pesa, from a fintech point of view, that's what 75% thought. And 25% thought about AI and automation, emerging technology.
Right. That's good. That's good news, right? Yeah. I'm hoping that we turn that 75% around and look at it more from the AI, because that's what it is.
Yes.
Right?
That's good news, and nobody said we never thought about it. So I think that's already great. Then the second question, I can see the results here. So what's holding Africa's tech frontier back? It's half-half. 50% think it's lack of education. The other 50% think it's lack of internet access. So those are the information just want to share with you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Yes, and let's talk to that, right? So on the next slide, I've got very high level overview of what the globe looks like, right? So from a global perspective, we've got 7.83 billion people on the planet. 5.2 billion people have access to mobile phones, and only 4.6 billion have access to the internet. So when we're looking at those polls and we're saying, well, mobile phone connectivity, absolutely, it's rife in Africa. A lack of internet access, I'm about to change that. So when we look at the next slide, and this is very much zoomed into South Africa, right? And I'll speak to why this is relevant. But essentially, out of a total population of 60 million in South Africa, there's over 100 million mobile connections, right? So straight off the bat, you can see that every person almost has access to 2 mobile phones, okay? The third point being that 64% of the South African population has access to the internet, which, if we go back a slide, you will notice that the global average is beaten within a South African perspective. What's more interesting, though, is that Nigeria itself is 3 times the size of South Africa. They voted at number 1. They also over 60% on an average of people that have access to internet. Behind them is Egypt, behind Egypt is Kenya, and then only 4th is South Africa. So this conception that Africans don't have access to internet, as you can see, already is moving away from what your original thoughts were. Another interesting point is that when we're looking at this, the 4.66 billion internet users across the globe, that is made up of 15% of Africa. So we are carrying a large portion of that. So when we talk through the next slide over here, and just before we get into that, one more slide, it's important to note that Africa's population at the moment is just a little bit below 1.3 billion people, right? Which isn't far off of China's 1.4 billion populace. And I'll touch on this in a bit more detail, but by 2050, or somewhere between 2050 and 2060, it's expected that Africa is going to carry more than a quarter of the globe's population, which is double China, right? And we're going to talk to that in a bit more detail. But what's interesting here is when we look at mobile connections from an African perspective, obviously mobile connections are allowing access to the internet, right? And the distribution of smartphones at cheaper rates are now infiltrating. So when we're having a look at this, Southern Africa has actually got the highest connection of mobile to population. When we look at North America in the top left, 106, 77 in the Caribbean, middle of Africa, cool, 55%, Northern Africa, 100%. Anyways, you get the gist of this. The point that I'm trying to make here is that when you compare Africa to what we would deem global leaders, it's quite easy to understand that Africa is not that far behind, okay? And that is the reality. So I've spoken a lot to the scale of Africa. I've spoken a lot around the landscape and what's sort of currently happening. But my vision, or at least what we can see happening with us being able to service the rest of the world, what is essentially holding us back from hitting these goals, okay? Well, first and foremost, if you had guessed the lack of connectivity, interestingly enough, on the next slide, we have a bunch of, and I've just put very, very high level things here. We've got Microsoft, Huawei, Google, and Facebook, global tech titans or giants that are investing in Africa's potential, right? So I'm not too sure if you've heard of the term the last billion mile, but essentially what that talks to is it's a race of these titans to make sure that they can connect the last billion people on the planet to internet, where in actual fact, there's still about 3 billion people short of internet access, the majority of which do not come from Africa. So something to think about there. So The reason why these tech giants are coming into Africa is for very, very specific reasons. And I've compiled 5 key trends that I want to take you through. But before we get into that, I'm going to run the next slide, which is another poll. And before you answer this question, I want to give you a hint, right? Europe has about 200 different languages, cultures, dialects, okay? When we look at Africa, how many different cultures exist within Africa? Do you think it's 1, 500, 2, plus minus 1,000, or 3, 2,000? So let's dive into that. Suzanne, will you let me know when that pops up?
Yes, I will.
But essentially, the first key point that I want to talk about is on the next slide. So what I've done here is I've quickly compiled just a few of the members of my office. These guys are distributed across Africa. As you can see, all of our tech resources are based in Africa because we strongly believe in this. But the first key trend is diversity. Okay. Now, the poll should give the results here, but Africa consists of nearly 2,000 cultures.
And this was the result, Chase. So we had 60% got it right. Said 2,000, 40% said 1,000. But 60% got the right answer, yes.
Brilliant. And that's it.
It's amazing, I think. I didn't know that, to be honest. So many different cultures, it's very impressive.
10, yes, exactly. 10 times the size of Europe.
Yes.
And I suppose, what does that mean, right? So in this picture, we've got people based in South Africa, of course, Nigeria, Kenya, Zambia, Zimbabwe. We've got Uganda and the DRC, right? That's essentially where we've got the majority of these people in this call. But Suzanne, exactly, what does that mean, right? So 10 times more diverse than any other continent. But what does it mean for you? Well, quite clearly, each and every one of these people have had different upbringings, different cultures, different beliefs. All of those different things combined allow, when we put these people together in one room, we start talking to the fact that this diversity allows for us to tackle problems from a different lens, right? It enables out-the-box thinking. Now, when we compare that to, the first-class thinking, or first world thinking, rather, that's essentially where most of the problems are getting solved in Silicon Valley. But the thing is, a lot of those people are sitting and thinking about a problem from a very similar lens. So enabling this and activating the diversity allows us to come up with very, very unique solutions to some of these problems, right? So, of course, the whole world is watching, for example, Silicon Valley and what's happening there and everything that's happening. But it's important to note, and I want to make this clear, that Africa's tech hubs are popping up at a faster rate than any other continent on the globe. So that's number one, right? Diversity. On to slide number 2. The key trend I'm talking to here is population growth. So Asia moving up, you can see Africa in the red. So Asia in the yellow, Africa in the red, right? And I mentioned this a little bit before. Africa is going to outgrow China, no doubt about that. Based on this, Africa is going to outgrow Asia, right? Far surpassing the rest of the continents, as you can see. So as it is today, 16% of the globe is made up of Africans. By 2050, 2060, 25% of the globe coming from here. And I touched on that a little bit earlier. But this really talks to and hints at the fact that there is potential for serious earthly influence from a technology perspective. And over and above this, you'll see that there's a youth age there. But the average African age is sitting at about 19 to 20 years old, right? This means that there is a very ambitious population of young individuals that are looking to break into the tech industry. Why? Because they have access to it. Everyone is on a mobile phone, have access to social media, talking to all of these things. They know what technology can do. So that's that's point number 2. On the next slide, I've just put together a very simple screen of something I would see as legacy technology, right? So key trend number 3 is the ability for Africa to leapfrog technology. We aren't burdened by legacy technology, as I'm sure most of you guys have experienced, right? Sitting in a bank, core systems, legacy. How do you change that? Well, those are things that are holding businesses back. Now, Over and above that, or maybe I'll give you an example of this from a very, very simple perspective, right? And it's not tech, but America essentially went ahead 100 years ago and built a Pan-American railway. Now, of course, that's all to connect. Africa didn't do that, but Africa doesn't need to do that, right? We now utilize cargo planes, which are faster, cheaper, more efficient, safer. All of those things we can leverage. Now, that's a simple example. Another simple example, maybe a little bit more driven towards what we're talking around here is, and specific a little bit more to fintech, is why would Africa go and build out a branch banking network? Okay. The reality is we just go straight to mobile banking. From another aspect, and we touched on this in the first poll, right? Education. Everyone is trying to solve the education problem, not through brick and mortar. So we've got institutions like Yale and Stanford investing billions of dollars into Africa to allow for these online learning platforms. Anyone, and at least what we've seen, the majority of people who have a passion are better than those that go and study it. So when we look at it from the perspective of software development, quite quickly we can see that we can start driving that, right? So over the last couple of years, Africa's gained just short of 1,000 software developers. Okay, that's in comparison to Africa's growth rate. And I'll touch on key trend number 4, which influences this. We can see an exponential rise in the amount of developers coming from Africa, solving for that supply and demand perspective. Another aspect is Africa is 58% proficient in English. Okay, whether they've learned that from TV, from school, from Instagram, whatever it may be, the reality is that the African economy is going to be driven by English. Okay, I want to touch on another aspect here, and the last one of this key trend, and that's the ability for Africa to be, well, we are situated right in the middle of the globe, right? Easy to connect left or the west and the east and service the entire globe from here. So taking all of these things into consideration, Africa is the next continent of tech leaders, 100%. And this isn't 30 years away. This is essentially 5 to 10 years away. Now, onto the next slide, which is key trend number 4, growing access to internet. Okay, at the moment, 85% of Africa is covered in internet. 60%, or the global average of 60% of users actually using internet. So there's a discrepancy of 25%. The only reason why that exists is because of the cost of connectivity. As that drops, we start enabling millions and millions and millions of people to gain access to the internet, which grows education and grows the ability for us to supply the rest of the globe. Now, as Africa grows from strength to strength, it's easy to see how we would be able to do that, right? But the proof's in the pudding. So let's take a look at the next slide, where Africa has built, developed, designed absolutely everything from their own doorstep, a whole bunch of tech unicorns. So very, very quickly, top left, Flutterwave, sitting at $1 billion market value. OPay, $2 billion. We've got Andela, who I'm sure you've heard of, right? $1.5 billion. Jumia, $3.3 billion. Sendwave, 1.7. We've heard of Paystack, right? Being acquired there by Stripe. But essentially, I can carry on here, right? And the essential message that I'm getting across here is that Silicon Valley technologies are being adapted, but they're being adapted to become uniquely African, right? The only difference between these businesses and the rest of the business and the rest of the tech giants in the world is the fact that these guys have built their technology in Africa and at a fraction of the cost. So let's talk about the next slide. Key trend number 5 is more efficient costs, right? So here's a very high level breakdown of some of Sovtech's costs, right? Managed agile teams. It's not staff augmentation. We're making sure these guys are delivering on a 2-week sprint cycle. So by breaking this down, I wanted to give a comparison around what was happening across the rest of the world. So in Africa, average hourly rate for a developer, 36. Eastern Europe, 55. Europe, 69. The US, 150. Now, of course, we can see that this is a big driver towards coming into Africa, and we are seeing that. So on the last slide, I just wanted to take you through and recap those last 5 points, right? Spoken through the five key trends. First one being diversity. That allows us to, Africa's diversity allows us to look at problems from a unique perspective, right? The second key trend is a growing population. That in accordance with the fastest growing emergence of tech hubs and code academies, with billions being invested from the last billion-mile investors, all of these things coming together with us being central and 58% English proficiency allows us to essentially service the world from one central location. The third point being the ability to leapfrog technology, clean eyes, making sure that we can absolutely innovate and think out of the box. Key point number 4, growing access to the internet. That, in tune with the cheaper connectivity rates, will see Africa boom. And point number 5, which is the last key trend, is cheaper rates for development itself, right? Increasing margins within your fintechs and allowing that to happen. So in conclusion, these are the reasons why I strongly believe that Africa is the next continent of world-class tech leadership. And as you can see, it's not far off. It's not a dream. So all in all, talent in Africa is, in my opinion, underutilized. I think there's almost 1 million software developers here and 4 million in the States. We're catching up, right? Africa is relatively undiscovered. It's a fast-growing breeding ground for software developers. And all of the popular skills that you're looking for can be found here. You just need to know where to find it, right? So while you're all out there chasing the dream of building the next fintech unicorn, I want you to make you think about your software or your software business. And I want you to make sure that you're making the right decisions about the right talent at the right price. And Africa is the next continent of world-class tech leadership. Thank you so much for your time. And Suzanne, over to you for any questions.
Fantastic. Super interesting. Thank you so much for the great presentation. And I was just thinking, Chase, about Elon Musk. Elon Musk, I mean, he's South African, one of the biggest, billionaires in the world, build up Tesla and other businesses very well. And he came from South Africa. He went to school there, before he went to the States and built his business further. So I guess there must be lots of Elon Musks there, in your neighborhood, probably, wanting to become discovered. So super interesting. Thank you very much. I will ask now all our members to please, ask your questions in the Q&A box on the right side of your screen, and we will go through the Q&A now. So we got the first question coming through, which is about what is South Africa's biggest tech hub, Chase?
So South Africa's biggest tech hub is Silicon Cape, based in the Western Cape. And from an African perspective, we've got a couple of front runners, but Nigeria sort of sits at around 85 tech hubs. They're first, and that's followed by South Africa at 80. So there's quite a big race between the African countries to make sure we can carry that. But I suppose from when we're talking around the level of developer, South Africa has the highest, followed by Kenya.
Yes. And how can you imagine such a tech hub to look like? Is this like lots of different startups all together in one accelerator space or in one area of the city? I mean, how does it look like?
Correct. So I think the strict definition is a group of businesses in a certain area or a certain building. So it can be either a city or a building.
Yes. Fantastic.
But obviously very much focused on innovation and changing the status quo.
Yes, that's great. Another question we got is, what are the biggest tech languages used in Africa, Chase?
Okay, interesting question. So I think to date, the number one tech language in Africa is still .NET, but that is followed very, very closely by JavaScript. And we're seeing a big surgence in all of the JavaScript technologies coming through Africa. There's a lot of interest. And I think even from a SoftTech perspective, we have the highest combination of JavaScript developers throughout Africa. And that's why we're following that trend.
Yes, excellent. I remember when I started coding, Chase, you won't believe that, but going back 20 years ago, I learned C++, which was at that time was an object-oriented language, very difficult, very different to nowadays.
Yes.
But it was my first start into the tech space, learning. And so it's great that you've got such a high level of developers who speak, different languages, who can program and code in different languages. Another question which came in from Jonathan is, what does SoftTech do and how do they fit in here? So how do you help, UK fintech companies? So how can you help them?
Sure. Jonathan, thanks so much. Good question. I think SoftTech is a custom software development business, and the purpose around why we're here is to make sure that we can take companies from 1 to 100 at scale at a fraction of the cost. So hand over your tech duties to us. We'll take care of it while you focus on the business.
Yeah. And I guess many people think, what about time difference? And I know between us, Chase, we've got an hour between London and Johannesburg. I believe is 1 hour time difference. So the time difference is not an issue. In terms of, I guess people might think in the UK, how can I be on top of what is being done, in South Africa, because you're far away. So how do you ensure that the clients in the UK are kept up to date and are basically always on top of things, that they know what happens, what's the progress?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. So Suzanne, from that perspective, being in Africa, we are well poised, right? Whether we're dealing with 4 hours to the west or 4 hours to the east, we're directly in the middle. We're able to facilitate and talk to people at any point in their business day, right? But I suppose the key to success is the tools that you use and leveraging those tools to ensure that we have asynchronous communication. So setting up dashboards, reporting dashboards. We've built our own internal tech that allows us to dive in and see exactly what developers are doing on a day-to-day basis, right? Because a lot of people are coming back and saying, well, the developers said it's not possible or it's taking long. We, in fact, can go and record that, right? Which I suppose is a big part of what FinTech is. Having access to that means that we can proactively work with our development teams and over and above that, leveraging that Atlassian suite, Slack, et cetera, and setting up the right environments to make sure that we do enable asynchronous communication.
Yes, that's great. Another question just came in, outsourcing to Africa over Eastern Europe. Is this the market you're going after? So what's the difference when let's say UK company compare, should I outsource to Eastern Europe, should I outsource to Africa? How would you compare that?
Sure. So I think we've seen the globe go from India to Eastern Europe, and now we're seeing Eastern Europe, everyone move from Eastern Europe to Africa. Now, the reason why that's different is, of course, we have a bigger population with more access to us creating these developers, which come at a fraction of the cost, right? So essentially, talent is distributed throughout Africa. Opportunity isn't at the moment. And as soon as the world captures on to that, you'll see that we'll be able to grow the rest of the world's tech at a faster rate than any other place in the world. So what's happening is everyone's going to Eastern Europe. Now the prices are going through the roof because there is a problem with supply and demand. Therefore, we're seeing that migration back into Africa.
Yeah, I've been at a FinTech conference in Lagos, 2 years ago, just before Corona hit us all, and I was so impressed, in Lagos about the FinTech ecosystem there and the whole state of technology companies. And at that time, I think Microsoft just announced, that they're building up their offices there as well. That's what you said, that the biggest tech companies realized, that Africa is the next huge wave of opportunities, and I saw that. Also them presenting, at this conference and really showcasing why they wanted to enter Africa and why they're doing it. So it was really good to see that. And like you said, being in Lagos, was incredible, eye-opening, because I never realized what big of a city it is, and what a metropolis it is. And besides of the lovely food, I must say, the food, the seafood was incredible. The amazing, delicious cuisine there, but also the people super friendly, super nice. In a large fintech sector, and there's a large fintech network as well across Africa, which is also really important in terms of networking, you know, and helping each other. So that's really good.
You've hit on a good point there, right? It's easy to work with Africa. Great food, right? Exceptional experiences. So it's almost a double reason why coming into Africa, come and visit, come and experience all of those two different cultures, all the same while building out your tech company from your hometown.
Yes, that's so true. We've got another question, which is about the number one problem to solve in Africa. So what do you think, Chase, is the number one problem to solve in Africa to make it the tech hub it's destined to become?
Absolutely. I think that's a good question. So I would say that the main thing to solve for is the cost of internet connectivity, right? Once we've brought that down, I mean, we've seen African mobile phones coming directly out of Africa. Companies like Brick that are developing pieces of software or pieces of hardware that enable connectivity even in the most rural areas. But once we can make that affordable and in line with the booming population, I think that the outcome is inevitable. And as soon as that happens and we're able to give access to millions and millions more, that's what will happen. And I just think that what's important to note is that Africa isn't a charity case, right? I've proven in this thing that we do it ourselves, and now we can do it for the rest of the world. And that's just one of the most important things that I want to bring up.
Yes, that's great. No, that's fantastic. So any other questions, please just type them into the Q&A section on the right side of your screen. We will share with all of you Chase's slides as well, and also all our members who could not join in person today. You will all receive them via email after the session today. And of course, anyone who has got or maybe wants to discuss it privately with you, Chase, you know, can reach you probably on LinkedIn, reach out to you on LinkedIn, or also get in touch via email at chase@softech.com, you know, for any follow-up questions. So I think that was fantastic. I really learned a lot, Chase. You know, I'm a big fan of Africa, as you know, and I think it's so important to really position the African continent as the future, you know, as our future of technology development, of partnerships, and as it becomes our, hopefully, you know, our talent pool globally of most ambitious, you know, talent who really want to change the world. And I think almost having Elon Musk as a role model, probably for the whole continent. You know, I remember Jack Ma was always a role model for Chinese entrepreneurs. You know, everybody wanted to become Jack Ma, and saw him, you know, as his role model to live up to. And I think with Elon Musk, I mean, you definitely have got a global role model, you know, which everybody admires. So I thank you so very much for sharing all your knowledge and expertise with us today, Chase, and everybody, yes, please keep in touch, you know, get in touch with Chase for any follow-up questions, and we will share the slides. And I look forward to speaking to you soon as well, Chase. So thank you very much for the great presentation.
Thank you so much, Suzanne, and look forward to speaking to you in the future.
Yes, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.